focusing on today, and that is our participation in the American Association of State Colleges and Universities, that's ASCU, in their new project called the American Democracy Project on Civic Engagement. We've discussed this briefly with you at earlier venues, but we're moving into what we call our kickoff stage, if you will, of that participation in that particular project. I should explain that we, Morehead State University, are one of 172 state institutions representing 1.6 million students that are participating in this particular project. And in fact, we were one of the first ones to begin participation last year. The goal of the American Democracy Project is, first of all, to create an intellectual and experiential understanding of and engagement in meaningful civic actions of undergraduate students. And secondly, to focus attention of the institution and the faculty on the civic value of the college experience. Bev McCormick is serving as the campus coordinator of the American Democracy Project. I get that confused with another project that we're also involved in. And she's begun initial implementation of the project in the Honors Leadership Residential College. She's also working with the steering committee of faculty, staff, and students, representatives, and I'll be inviting any others interested to join her. We are now entering the first phase of the project involving what's called campus conversations about the role of civic engagement in the mission of the university and how the campus can become more civically engaged both within and outside of the curriculum. I've given the department chairs a set of questions prior to today's meetings, set of questions for them to pursue as a means of assessing the current and potential civic engagement activities and for developing a departmental action plan for enhancing civic engagement within the department. Our goal is to develop by the end of the semester department and institutional plans for enhancing civic engagement throughout the university and to initiate those plans next year. Any faculty or staff member who would be interested in working with Bev and the committee, feel free to contact her or contact me, and we'll make sure that we get you involved. So now it's time for me to introduce our Convocation speaker, Sylvia Lovely. I believe my introduction of Sylvia will make it quite clear why we have asked her to serve as our featured speaker and to help us kick off our campus conversations about civic engagement. Sylvia earned her bachelor's degree in English from Morehead State University in 1973 and a JD degree from UK in 1979. After practicing law in Florida, Sylvia returned to Kentucky as an assistant attorney general for the state and an adjunct professor at UK. Prior to being named to her current position as the executive director / CEO of the Kentucky League of Cities, Sylvia was a staff attorney and director of the Kentucky League of Cities Intergovernmental Services. The Kentucky League of Cities is a statewide association consisting of 350-some member cities, and Sylvia is responsible for all aspects of the association's operations. While I could list numerous awards and honors that Sylvia has received, such as being named MSU's Alumni Hall of Fame in 1966, of most relevance to us today are the activities and the accomplishments which make her a role model of civic engagement. In her role as an MSU regent, she has often challenged us to be even more active in the region and to engage our students in civic activities throughout the region. In short, Sylvia Lovely walks the talk, as evidenced by her role, first as former director of the Fayette County Bar Association Pro Bono program, where she was responsible for the recruiting and supervision of more than 200 volunteer attorneys, as past chair of the Kentucky Center for Public Policy, as founder of the New Cities Foundation, and as treasurer of Kentucky's for Better Transportation, to name only a few. We are honored today to have Sylvia Lovely as our featured speaker to share with us her experience in making civic engagement work and her thoughts about how Morehead State University, its faculty, its staff, and its students can become even more engaged in the life of the region, of the state, and of the nation. It's my pleasure to introduce Ms. Sylvia Lovely.
Thank you very much. This is a tall podium, and I'm a short gal. You know, it's great, though. I got to tell you, I usually don't look up at an audience. I've given speeches before to, usually you're up on a stage and you're looking down over a podium about this size. Look how tall this is. People have told me afterwards, you're feeling kind of like, you're vulnerable on stage, and people will say afterwards, well, gee, it was great, except we just saw the bobbing of the top of your head. That's a really humbling experience. But anyway, it's great. And thank you for inviting me here today, Dr. Eaglin, Dr. Moore, Bonnie, great to see you again, and Buck, a good friend, and everyone who is here today. I am so flattered. I'm overwhelmed by an opportunity like this one. Now, I'm going to ask you if you can hear me in the back of the room, okay? I'm going to get cozy with this thing because I want to see you and I want you to hear me. Now, I've been on the Board of Trustees. It was a bit of a homecoming for me. You heard a bit about how I came, or you didn't hear how, but you heard that I came to Morehead. You'll hear a little bit more about that in a moment. But I've served on the Board of Trustees, and I've very humbly accepted some wonderful honors here. So I've sat on this stage before and other stages around this campus. But I have to tell you that I have a story to tell about performing on this stage in the early 70s and other stages. I think I actually rehearsed here and performed on the Button Hall stage. Am I right about that? There's an auditorium there. Okay, well, I was a little girl from, my parents were from West Liberty. Typical of their era, they had little education, not even high school graduates, much less college. I got to come home to go to Morehead State University. And I got to tell you, the truck pulled into town and the turnip fell off of it. And I was the turnip off the turnip truck. And when I was a sophomore, I was nominated, I think it was Lambda Chi Alpha, to be in the Miss MSU pageant. And I was like, well, that's really cool, but what does that mean? And somebody said, oh, you have to walk around on stage. You're going to have to buy some nice clothes. You've got to answer a few questions. I said, well, that's cool. I'll do that. I can't remember how many people there were, but lo and behold, I made it to the top 10. I was stunned. And I said, well, this is really cool. What does this mean? And they said, oh, well, nothing more except you have to perform a talent. And I said, but you don't understand. I have no talent. So I thought, and I probably conferred with colleagues, and I said, okay, I can play church music on the piano. Surely I can do something with the piano. And so I sat up all night and devised a skit. I knew the one thing that I could do was pretend like I was a little girl at her first piano recital that forgets her music. That's what I did, folks. And it went over really well. People actually laughed, and I think, my memory fails me, but I think I got an honorable mention for that talent performance. I didn't win the pageant, though, so there is justice in the world. That's my performance story of Button Hall, and I sat down here. Dr. Moore tells me there's a piano in the back room. I promise you I won't get it out and start playing it. But I start with that personal story for two reasons. One, you're going to hear me tell personal stories throughout my presentation. I don't have a great big life. I'm probably like you. I have a regular life. But I have stories to tell about that life, and I use them a lot in my presentations. But the second reason that I use that stage story about adapting to what you find yourself in the middle of, great opportunities, is that, folks, we're on a new stage here, aren't we? It's early January. Everything's starting anew. Psychologically, I think we think like that. So I'm going to issue you a bold challenge. I think the American Democracy Project is one that you can do here at Morehead, and wait to hear this. I believe in the heart of my heart that you, right here on a tiny dot on the map, can literally change the world. What are you going to do? You're going to create a community of caring on this campus, of unprecedented civic responsibility that will carry out into the communities not only of this region. Not all the kids here are from here, not all of you are from here, but you'll remember, no matter where you go, about that important principle. And you'll remember these small places of this region. Now, I'm thinking big these days because one of the things I'm preparing for has me scared to death. I'm speaking at the Unity Breakfast on the Martin Luther King Day in Lexington on the 19th of January. As a result, I've been reading a lot of speeches from great people. And folks, throughout history, they've faced the same problems we face. Nothing is new under the sun. But what is always in every one of those great speeches, be it by Gandhi, be it by Martin Luther King, is the survival in spite of incredible odds. And so forgive me, but I'm thinking a little Gandhi-ish here this morning, thinking a little Martin Luther King-ish, that perhaps you could be a pebble in a pond and your ripples could be felt throughout the world. I think it can be done here and now. Are you game to try? Are you? All right. Let's get awake here this morning. First of all, though, I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and then we're going to try to answer them here quickly. Why here, and why us? Let's also tackle the question of why now. Things do seem hopeless, don't they? You turn on the dial, and there's the real-time Iraqi war. You turn the other dial, and there's Paris Hilton down on the farm. Your reality is a lot different, isn't it? What are we going to do? What have we accomplished so far? I'm going to share a personal story of an epiphany with you. And finally, what would be the result if we're successful, and what will be the result if we don't do this important work? But let's first of all tackle why here and why us in Morehead, Kentucky, truly is a dot on the map. When I was in Japan several years ago, I couldn't even find out who had won the governor's race in Kentucky. All they knew was Kentucky Fried Chicken and the Derby. That's all they knew about, right? Well, I have a bias, folks. And my bias is for this region, and my bias is for Morehead State University. Now, I know that very few of you in this room, challenge me if I'm wrong, were born to your profession, but I was. I was actually born in City Hall in Frenchburg, Kentucky, it's only about 20 miles, I suppose, up the road. That's true. Now, my parents had gone to Ohio from West Liberty, and Ohio, folks, in the early 50s was the promised land. That was where a man with an 8th grade education could go and find a job. And my father found one at National Cash Register. Had my brother up there, but they decided, no, we want to try it one more time. They came back to Kentucky and tried to farm on a little farm that sat where I-64 now goes through, where that sign is to Frenchburg. The only hospital in the region was in Frenchburg. They left when I was about 3 months old, and he took his job back. I was on the phone about 14 years ago when I started out as a staff attorney for the league, and I was on the phone with the city clerk of Frenchburg, and she was renovating an old building into City Hall. And I said, well, at the end of the conversation, I said, I was born in an old hospital there. You wouldn't know what became of it, would you? She gasped, and she said, you won't believe it, but that's what we're renovating into City Hall. So, destiny has brought me to my work. But MSU is special, folks, and I'll only use one quick example. Everywhere I go, I meet graduates of this university. And I was talking the other day there are 2 lobbyists who usually, and the assembly is starting today. Keith and I be there, don't they? But I thank you for inviting me here today so I can be out of Frankfurt for the day. But usually ranked number 1 and number 2 in influence, according to surveys of legislators and lobbyists alike, are 2 lobbyists. One is a name familiar to you, I'm sure, Terry McBrayer. The other is Jitter Allen. I was talking to Jitter the other day. He said that he and Terry were roommates their first year in college here at Morehead. Now, apparently the president separated them after the first semester. It must have been a rivalry even back then. But isn't that amazing? Just one little fact. But Dr. Eaglin, I get a lump in my throat every commencement when you ask the students in the audience to stand who are first-generation college students. And over half the room stands up. I get a chill down my spine because I'm one of those. And I think one of our goals, if I'm correct, is that won't happen. Someday, half the room won't stand up. But how do we make that go away but preserve a certain kind of grittiness that is so special among the students here? Tell me I can't, and that's precisely what I'm going to do. Now, college wasn't expected of me. Law school was a fluke. Somebody said, oh, you might like to do that. And I thought, well, why not? It was like the pageant. So I did it, and I've never regretted it. That's a stage 2. My mother died 2 years ago. I'll tell you a bit more about that in a moment. I used recently, and I write a lot of op-ed articles, and I recently wrote one about this. I was rifling through my desk, and I found my Social Security card. Why did I keep my mother's Social Security card as a memento? From West Liberty, remember, of these hills. My mother came back to Kentucky to watch my boys, and my boys are now 22 and 19. She was their babysitter from the time they were infants. She was my housekeeper. And before that, she was a custodian at an elementary school in Ohio. That card validated my mother. That was a symbol to her of dignity and of work. My father told me after she died that she had actually begun to collect applications from fast food restaurants because she was afraid that when our boys grew up, we would not need her services any longer. And she vowed never to be without work. That, my folks, is dignity that is very special to these hills. That's what we fight for. That's what's inside of the folks of this region. A tremendous resource that can be used for good or used for ill. But why now? Why now? It all seems so hopeless. The world is so overwhelming. We're facing budget woes, you know that. You know that of this region, we're already behind, and we hear the economy is now restructuring on us again. The new economy wasn't what it was. High-tech jobs are even moving offshore. We know that our young people are leaving. That's documented. We know that our towns were founded for far vastly different reasons than they exist today. And on top of all of that mobility and people moving around, our voting statistics are so down. In a recent article we wrote in our magazine called City, said the United States ranks 103rd out of 131 democracies in the world in voting participation. That's a sad thing. And young people, 18 to 24, more of them voted in American Idol than voted in the last presidential election. We've got to change that, don't we? There's a famous writer who's written a lot about, and his book is called Bowling Alone. More Americans are bowling, but they're bowling alone. They're not in teams anymore. We volunteer a lot. In fact, surveys show that Kentuckians are actually volunteering more. But guess what? They're volunteering in risk-free settings. They're volunteering to coach their child's Little League team. There's nothing wrong with that. They're volunteering to put on the festival in town. There's nothing wrong with that. But where's the risk-taking, folks? And finally, there's a yearning that is coming through. Many said it came through just after 9/11. Didn't last very long, but a yearning for something more in our lives that actually is creating a paradox. We actually are seeking out local community more than we ever have in the past, even as the world gets bigger and more global. So what are we doing, and what can we do more? How can we create this environment of civic responsibility? You have done an amazing thing here. This is amazing. How can we build on this to make this the most special place on earth? Again, forgive me, but I've been reading these wonderful speeches. Adlai Stevenson in 1950s, when he accepted reluctantly the nomination to run against Eisenhower, said in describing sailing, "You go with the wind, you fight against it, but you don't drift and you never not sail." I like to think of it too as you eat an elephant the only way you can, one bite at a time. And you don't try to boil the ocean. You try to change things right here by putting a lot of little things together that will amount to a bigger thing. And I think that's the potential you have with the American Democracy Project. It's a springboard, folks, and I understand that in the next year you're going to be in conversations, and that's a wonderful way to begin. You will have wide latitude, and all I hope to do here today is give you a few, maybe a word or two of guidance on how maybe to conduct those conversations. Let me share with you my own epiphany about civic responsibility. I had my resume described to you. I came to work. I'm a lawyer by profession. Came to work for the Kentucky League of Cities 14 years ago, working for all those cities. We're up to 370, hard to believe, but there are that many across the land. But 2 years ago, I did have an epiphany. And I founded the New Cities Foundation, which frankly, folks, has become my passion and my focus. And it is about building local citizenship, and we have actually concretely identified what we think are 12 principles of city building. And I define city, by the way, as very broad. That is the act that is as old as time of us coming together in community to do more together to create a greater and higher level of civilization than we could possibly hope to have as individuals. 2 years ago, my mother fell ill of a very sudden and very deadly cancer, and she suffered horrendously for 6 months before she died. Now, I had lived a life that was far from my parents' life. In fact, they had pushed me away because education was my rescue. It was what pulled me out of a life I knew I didn't want and that they did not want for me. They felt inferior to me, and they never let me forget that they did. But I dropped out of my work life for 6 months to care for my mother. There was no one else to do it. My father was 81. He could not do it. She died at home, and we sat by her bedside. And I heard their stories of Eastern Kentucky. I heard about their poverty, no shoes, one pair maybe a year, no Christmas gifts. But I heard about the richness of their spirit. And I suddenly was very humbled with all my fancy education about what I was hearing. I learned 2 things. One, I learned very humbly that the world I was a part of, not my mother's world, but the other world went on just fine without me. All right? Some point or another in your life, you learn that. And the second thing I learned is that education of the mind wasn't enough. That a passion for a cause is all that we can leave behind. And that our lives are so complex, and if you ignore any part of it, it's to your peril. I rededicated my life to community building. I thought about my parents, and every single day they are my poster children for people who had to be uprooted from community in order to find their way, who lived in poverty. And my life now is dedicated to local citizenship and strengthening it so that the people at the local level will take responsibility for caring for each other. That's what we want to do here at Morehead. Are you with me? Now, my work consisted of lobbying in Frankfurt and doing all of those things, but there was another part. It was a part I hadn't really dealt much with. It was what I call, if working with those cities was the hardware, making sure City Hall revved up every morning and provided services, what was the software and what was necessary? It was the people. To combine a strong sense of place that I told you earlier is actually growing with the global world we can no longer ignore. And I just tell a brief story. Somebody sent me the cover of Kentucky Explorer the other day. A 1914 baseball team was pictured on the front, and my grandfather was in the corner. It was the Mize 9 from Mize, Kentucky. It was a baseball team. And I thought about his world then. It was very small, wasn't it? The world was very small. His life was self-contained. West Liberty was the big city. They rarely went anywhere else. Those things have changed. I like to tell a little story and have you put in your mind while I'm telling this story something I know every one of you knows, where you were on 9/11. Let me tell you where I was on 9/11 to illustrate how the world has changed. I had taken my mother back for her last visit home. I knew it probably would be, it most assuredly was. She died in December. She was very weak at that point, and we went to West Liberty. I don't know if you remember, but it was a gorgeous day. It was beautiful outside. And we had a grand time. We went to the McDonald's there in town, and Ronald McDonald was there. I have a picture of us with Ronald McDonald. Surreal. And on the way out of town, there was a tobacco field about waist high. And I don't know about you, but I don't know of anything prettier in Kentucky. I know it's got its problems, but there's nothing prettier than a waist-high tobacco field glistening in the sunlight. My father got so excited. He was 81, remember? And I stopped the car, and he ran out into the middle of the field. And he's holding out his hands, and I'm posing him for a picture. And my mother was too weak to go. And he said, "It's so great to be back in Kentucky." I dropped the camera. I said, "Daddy, now wait a minute. You've been in Kentucky for 20 years. You watched the boys in Lexington." "Oh, no, no," he said. "I'm not in Kentucky till I'm in West Liberty." That was his place. Now, I think you'll agree with me that my father and that tobacco field are in a race for time, and they're on the sooner rather than later stage. They're both going to go out of business, right? So what is the new sense of place? I don't think my father is all that wrong, and I don't think it's all that different for young people today. They have a sense of place. We just need to figure out how it's different in the 21st century. Now, I told you what we did was develop 12 principles of city building, and I have that in a brochure. I can supply that to you. Obviously didn't have enough, couldn't have carried enough to give to you here today. But our 12 principles revolve really around three things, and I think you'd find these things to almost be commonsensible. They're little things that we take for granted, but they're an integral part of our community lives and a higher order of civilization. They're about connections to place and to each other and to the outside world. It's changed, hasn't it? We are engaged in a project right now. We're trying to bring high-speed internet access to some small Kentucky towns. And I know that that's a challenge and an issue. One of my mayors, just a quick story, out in western Kentucky, was telling me that his car was stolen. And he said he got the call from the police at 2 o'clock in the morning. "We found your car. We think it's yours, and it's in the Walmart parking lot." Put him in the car, took him out there, and right under the bright lights of the super Walmart sat his car. He observed, "Sylvia, things are really changing, but I guess even thieves end up at Walmart." So we do connect in different ways and in different places. Under connections, though, you'll see, if you look at our 12 principles, that we have to encourage youth diversity and inclusiveness. We have to encourage education, folks, like there is no tomorrow. By the way, Jenny Fox, who is the new Secretary of Education, chairs the New Cities Foundation. She is taking it on, head on, as the Secretary of Education. We have to embrace the arts, and folks, we have a very unhealthy lifestyle in Kentucky. We need to embrace healthy living. The second one is civic pride in place and in spirit. Now that is important to us, and it is something that we struggle with both on the Kentucky League of Cities side and the New Cities side. You have to remain true to your uniqueness as a community. We are starting to turn into what we call generica, or the Walmartization of America. You don't merely grow, you plan, you build beautifully, you steward the environment, and you cultivate leadership and civic involvement. And finally, maybe my personal favorite is hope and opportunity for the future. That's what my father could not find in the Kentucky of his era. But we have to do all things, don't we? Because the world changes on us. And we have to figure out what it is we're about. And this university plays such an integral role in this region's progress in this arena. I'm so excited as a Board of Trustees member about some of the opportunities that I think are on our horizon. So under each of those three things, connectedness to each other and the outside, civic pride in place and spirit, and hope and opportunity for the future are the things that our communities must provide to all of us. And our students can be out there spreading the word. Are you with me? Our goal is to establish great communities that we're calling new cities, remember, in the generic sense of people coming together. And we need an army of believers. And here's some of the things we're doing. One, we're trying to identify the places out there that get it, so that our people, who are the believers, who are the army, have something as a frame of reference to go out and compare places to. We're holding community conversations, much as you're holding one over the next year. You may have read about our Erasing Racism project in Lexington, where we have started racial conversations about the issue of racism. We've had our second summit. Lexmark funded it. It's been a tremendous success. We are teaching civic activists. I've been working with the University of Louisville, and I hope to work with Morehead State University on training a cadre of civic activists to go forth with the 12 principles, and also student interns. We did a pilot program with student interns, and they loved it, folks. They found it so enriching to go back to communities and then come back, and that's an important piece, to come back and tell their stories. And I'm going to tell you, the New Cities Foundation sees as one of its missions to connect back our army of believers, our civic activists. One of the things that I'm told over and over by folks who are out there trying to make change in their communities is that they get discouraged and they give up. They go back, they learn great things, maybe they went to a conference or they came to a class here, they go back and they try to make change, they run into brick walls. We hope to do something about that because that is the death rate of civic activism when you get people back out with the real people is pretty high, and we need to do something about that. I mentioned the grant that we have with the Rural Utility Service in Washington, D.C. to wire the Eastern Kentucky communities. We're doing that. And we're also expecting a grant later this month that I can't announce now to work on this internship program, and I'm going to be talking to folks here about that. So we are making progress, but it's eating an elephant. It's one bite at a time, but that's okay. We're not trying to boil the ocean. Results. What will happen if we do our work well, and what will happen if we don't? Let me reference a speech I heard just after 9/11. I'm an avid note taker when I hear speakers because they sometimes say the most amazing things. It was right after 9/11, and he said 5 things changed after 9/11. 1, little things started to matter again. Remember that? Remember the news stories where people were crisscrossing the country in airplanes and they said, no, wait a minute. I don't want to live like that anymore. I want to see my children grow up. I want to do little things. Little people matter. Firemen, policemen, people that we really pretty much took for granted. Being authentic was better than some of the slick stuff that we saw. People started saying hello on the street and in elevators. And for a very brief time, and it was a brief moment, partisanship went out the window. But, as many have pointed out, all of that quickly dissipated. Some say we didn't capitalize at that moment on an opportunity. So, folks, we can accept the status quo, or we can decide here and now today that it's going to be better. That we can meet the needs of these students to take advantage of the greatest resource we have and make their lives broader. It's not about just educating them. It's about something much bigger. And we can take this tremendous resource and we can show them and build on what is already the case, their sense of civic responsibility and their responsibility back to others and to their community. Every single day I hear somebody tell me that nobody cares anymore. I hear them ask, where is the statesmanlike behavior? Where is civil discourse? We don't hear it anymore. Why do we have so much and others so little? Well, here's what we can do. You can change the world right here in Morehead, Kentucky. Just a quick story. I went to Williamsburg, Virginia last spring. I hadn't known the history of Williamsburg, Virginia. It was a dowdy, rundown town until one minister in town decided he would approach John D. Rockefeller, who was coming through town one day to dedicate the Phi Beta Kappa building at William and Mary. He stopped him, tried to talk him into renovating the town and redoing it into America's colonial town. He refused, of course, but the guy kept after him, kept after him, kept after him. Look what happened. John D. Rockefeller had a summer home there as well. It was an amazing story of perseverance and a decision that this one person made that they were going to change the world. Don't get too confused over just getting people to volunteer or just do a project. What we're talking about here is total immersion in a way of life. And it's very different from just volunteering, although volunteering is certainly a part of that immersion. Remember that being a good steward and being a good civic responsible person involves some risk-taking. It involves every single day questioning things that you see and being willing to step out. I read an interesting, when I was reading about Martin Luther King, apparently Kennedy sent word to Martin Luther King when he was organizing his marches in the South and said, Don't do it right now. You'll jeopardize the passage of the Civil Rights Bill. Martin Luther King went right on, didn't he? And he said, I've never seen a revolution that wasn't ill-timed. And finally, as a final story, I want to talk to you about courage to do it right. Now, I told you in the beginning, I'm just a regular person. I have a regular life, and I have a simple story of courage. It's not a grand story. You know, I told you the story of my parents being born poor, going to Ohio. I lived a very, very good life, a loving life. And I had nearly anything I wanted. Now, my mother taught me to lie. When I'd go out and buy clothes, like that dress I had to buy for the pageant, she said, just tell your daddy it cost half what you paid for it. You know, it's okay. You know, lying is okay here. He'll get along better with that. But I want to tell you about one simple act of courage that a very simple woman exercised. I told you I came home to Morehead. When I was a senior in high school in Ohio, believe me, I was just another one of those Appalachian kids. I had always excelled in school, but I was very much tracked in the bunny courses. I was not in college prep. And when I was a senior in high school, I said to my mother one day, you know, I think I want to go to college. She looked at me so shocked, and she said, okay. And that was in Dayton, Ohio. And at that time, Wright State was just getting started. And she said, oh, okay. She said, I'm liking this better and better. She said, you can live at home and go to Wright State. And in a moment that took everything I had, I turned to my mother and I said, no, I don't think you understand. I need to go away to go to college. And I don't know, most of you here are probably old enough to remember E.F. Hutton commercials. When E.F. Hutton speaks, the world listens. The world stopped, folks, for the longest time. And then my mother began to cry. And she cried. And it seemed like she cried forever. And just as I was this close to saying, okay, I'll stay home and go to Wright State, she wiped her tears and she looked up and she said, no, I want you to go away. She said, you can go to Morehead. It's home. They'll take care of you there. And Dr. Eaglin, they did. And now it's our turn, folks, to show courage and take care of our students in the way that they deserve. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you for your ideas, for your inspiration. Thank you most of all for your passion. And I trust we can carry that passion back to our departments and through the rest of this semester as we talk about how we can continue to make a difference, an even bigger difference in the lives of our students in the region. To move on to other issues, with that fine inspirational start, it's now my privilege and honor to introduce President Ronald Eaglin.
You know, Sylvia just gave us a wonderful speech. She gave us a challenge. Let's stand up and give her a hand, huh? Let's stand up and give her a hand. I can tell you, Sylvia, without a doubt, that this group has followed through on just about every challenge that I've had the honor to give to them over the last 12 years. It just seems almost like yesterday when I was in Button Auditorium and gave my first speech to a much different audience then, a much older audience, to be honest with you, an audience that has changed greatly. As I look around this room today and I see the youth, really, that did not exist so much then, with our average tenure being a little over 20 years, and now our average tenure on the faculty being around 9 years, which means that I've had an opportunity to be with most of you through your career here. Also, when this morning, Bonnie and I got up very early, and had a wonderful ceremony honoring our staff. Some of them are here again today, this afternoon or this morning. And Gene Cottle made the same observation, and I must admit, I didn't really think of that, Gene, and I don't know where you are, but I thank you for bringing that forward, that we've had a tremendous change in our staff. And many of our old-timers have retired. Bonnie, if you'll come up with me for a moment. With mixed emotions that I inform you that Bonnie and I have decided to retire at the end of this academic year. Now, I'm going to get emotional during this. Several years ago, I had to speak at a funeral, and to a man who was very close to me. And I made it through, and I'm going to make it through today. It's been a great deal of thought, really, that Bonnie and I have gone through to make this decision. It's hard to believe that we have spent 40 years serving 5 different universities. The past 30 years have just literally flown by. 18 years in the University of South Carolina system as a Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs and eventually Chancellor of Coastal Carolina University. And then a kind of a life-changing event on June 30th, 1992, 12 years here as the president of Morehead State University. And we believe with your really tremendous help that we'll be leaving this institution much stronger than when we came in July of 1992. Our academic departments are the best they've ever been. Our student retention rate and the number of students we serve are the largest in the history of this institution. More disciplines are accredited, and we have carefully groomed many of you to assume the leadership positions within the university. The prognosis for the long-term future of this university is very, very good. Even though our primary goal is teaching, you have improved our research production more than tenfold since 1991. And with the advent of IRAP, our community service has steadily increased and has been felt throughout our region. This is why I know this new challenge will be one that you will embrace wholeheartedly. We also improved the physical plant with major renovations and new square footage while preserving the historic buildings at a cost of really more than $50 million over the last 12 years. As an institution, we are a leader in distance learning and the use of computer and other media for instructional improvement. We also were the pioneers of P16 and created the Kentucky Folk Arts Center and the Kentucky Center for Traditional Music. The establishment of the Space Science Center, which you will literally see come to life in front of your eyes, will revolutionize science in our region, bringing national attention to our campus and really providing a symbol of hope of the future for the people we serve. We also have enhanced our services to students with the development of the Wellness Center, MSU 101, an improved general education program. We also were a leader in the nation in a successful conversion of our football program while retaining a Division I athletic program that meets all Title IX criteria. There are so many other accomplishments that you and those who served before you have accomplished. As your president, I have had to make some difficult decisions that may not have been approved by all of you at one point in time by faculty and staff. However, you would have had to be here before I came, The fact is very clear. Faculty Senate and Staff Congress are much stronger and have a greater influence on institutional decision-making than ever before in the history of this institution. And we have a very open administrative process. I hope you agree with that. But you really can't really appreciate that until you have worked at another place. Believe me, this is a very open place, and I'm very proud of that. Bonnie and I are leaving with a great admiration for all of you and what you do every day to help students and our community and our region be successful. Persons outside of this institution give time and money to enhance what you do. This symbol of your own generosity certainly helps to support their involvement. I've seen our endowment grow from $700,000 in 1992 to almost $20 million, with most of the growth in the last 5 years. And I predict by the time I leave office, which will probably be sometime this summer, that our endowment will be up around $23 million. A new president will need the same cooperation that Bonnie and I have enjoyed. There are some serious challenges that will have to be faced over the next few months and years. But remember the long haul. Don't get wrapped up in the short. We have to face the fact that our state is broke. It's literally broke. It's $302 million in debt, or certainly in income that did not materialize. We have had to return already $1.4 million to help the state overcome this shortfall in revenue. And it is right that we do that. We must do our share. The next biennium, though, the projections are even more dire. They are projecting over a $700 million shortfall in income. We will not be able to offset these cuts by tuition increases alone. We cannot place more burden on our students, at least beyond reason. So those institutions that say that they can raise tuition to get them out of their woes are really ill-informed. The best way we serve our people is to keep our costs within the reach of our families. We may lose up to an additional $2 million or more from our budget next year. Plus, we were told just the other day that we have to place about another $500,000 increase in the university's contribution to our retirement accounts. I want them to do that, but we have no choice. And it would cost us about $500,000 more. And then, of course, next year we will be faced with the usual things that face all of our households. Electricity costs more, software costs more, insurance costs more, everything costs more. So we will see the usual increases in fixed costs. We will again have to, or be forced to decide how to handle such deep cuts that may approach as high as 10% by 2005. I do not want to leave as your president without doing my share of helping us set the stage to get through such a difficult time. I will be meeting with the Budget Committee, Faculty Senate, Staff Congress to really help develop a plan to help the new president, whoever he or she may be, cope with the fiscal challenges that we face. Some of you may not know this. I mean, most of you probably do not know this. I was selected to be your president in March of 1992. When I accepted the job, I came with great, and I still think it's the best thing we ever did in our lives. I came with great anticipation of what we accomplished. And when I arrived on July 1, we lost 12.5% of our budget. That was not a great way to start. But you know, I've learned something in my 60-plus years, and those pluses are getting more and more. We can get through this together, not apart, not by bitching, not by saying, oh, woe is me, but by doing the things that we're all capable of doing. And as working together to come to the best decisions we can to help this new president to move this institution to the great future that is out there for you, because it truly is there. We will emerge stronger from this event. And there's an excitement when you bring a new person in. And that excitement in itself, with your help, will help us emerge much stronger. As you can see, this presidential search is most important. The presidents, for all their good points and all their bad points, we are human beings. I guess Sylvia said it best. We're little people too. We have needs, we have ideas, we have wants. We suffer, we're happy, we're people. And the next person will be a human being too. But that search for this person is going to need your help to help make sure that we bring here the best person to help you guide this institution to even higher heights than we have been privileged to see it move in the last 12 years. Now, I know many of you, if not all of you, are interested in how the search will be handled. I'm almost apologetic and sad that the timing of our retirement comes at such a challenging time. I reassure you that our decision was made well in advance of this fiscal situation. Many of you know that I have had, at least a couple of years ago, some health issues that made me start thinking, kind of the epiphany that Sylvia was talking about. This woman, she deserves me. I don't know if I'll have a chance to address you all at one time again. So let us take this opportunity to thank you for making this one of the most cherished periods in our lives. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, please. I don't want to start falling again. I know all of you are concerned of how we're going to proceed. Actually, the decisions that will be made and your involvement will affect you for the rest, many of you, the rest of your careers, and some of you for a great deal of your professional life. I understand that. So with us today to share some thoughts about how the process will work is our very able Chair of the Board of Regents, Buck Hinkle.
Good morning. Well, this is a day that in some respects is inevitable. Like everything in life, change comes to leadership. But the fact that this day is inevitable makes it no less momentous and no less challenging. Dr. Eaglin, you will be leaving some big shoes to fill. Under your leadership, our enrollment and retention has improved dramatically, the endowment even more dramatically. Under your guidance, we have established the first program of distinction under the Higher Education Reform Act. The space science program has been launched. We had the state's first online degree. The regional campus has expanded. The teaching ed curricula was revamped, and the list goes on and on. While much will be said and written about those and other accomplishments, perhaps Dr. Eaglin's greatest legacy to Morehead State is the renewed sense of purpose and its commitment to great teaching, to student success, and to preserving the unique cultural pillars of East Kentucky. So to you, Dr. Eaglin, and to you, Bonnie Eaglin, on behalf of the Board of Regents and people throughout the university family, I say to you, thank you, not only for taking such good care of Morehead State, but for leaving it a better place. This is our challenge, to bring to this campus a new president who will build solidly on Dr. Eaglin's achievements and likewise leave Morehead State a better place than when she or he finds it. The search begins today. A nationwide search will be launched, eventually with the help of a search firm. An RFP for that search firm is going out today. An advertisement for the position will be going out in a few days. A website is being established to solicit comments from the university family and beyond, and to allow interested persons to track the progress of the search. After the selection of the search firm, the search committee will be formed. It was the consensus of the board that it would be best to get the input from the search firm before we actually formed the search committee. I want to assure you that faculty, staff, alumni, and friends of the university will be involved. The timing, if all goes well, will be to have the new president on board by the commencement of the next school year. But I want to emphasize that quality is paramount. I have no doubt that because of Dr. Eaglin's efforts and the efforts of everyone associated with faculty, staff, that this is, to use Dr. Eaglin's words, a plum position. We should have a real wealth of applications. But as I said, quality is important, and an arbitrary deadline will not be employed for this, just so we can have someone by that date. We will take the time that is necessary to get the best person we possibly can as Dr. Eaglin's successor. So, the activity begins this month. We are asked, in the advertisement of the position, we will be saying that those who have their application in by May 15th will have the best assurance that their application will be considered. And so we begin the search. With enormous gratitude to Dr. and Mrs. Eaglin for their dedicated and hard work, their vision, their generosity of spirit, and indeed their affection for this place, and with the determination to build on their legacy through the leadership of a new president. The right person is out there. I speak for my fellow board members when we say we are counting on your help to find that person. Thank you.
Thank you, Buck. It's been quite a momentous convocation, to say the least. We have lunch waiting for us next door in the Fulbright rehearsal room. Let's enjoy each other's company and talking about the good things and the momentous things that we've heard today. Thank you. Have a good semester.